It's a pleasure to be back, and I'm excited to continue, what I did last week, which was focusing on what does it mean to be an emotionally intelligent parent, teacher, leader. And today we're going to continue, with that mindset, but we're going to think about now, like, how do we do this with other people, whether it be our partners, whether it be our children or our students. So I'm going to ask everyone to get settled in their seat, wherever you're sitting right now. Take a nice long inhale, exhale, maybe loosen up your neck a little bit. I realized that quarantine and social distancing has made my body more tight than it's ever been. I think I've sat more in the last 6 months than I have in my entire life. And now I'm going to sit again and do this presentation. All right, take a nice long inhale and an exhale. So as Melissa shared, my day job is I am a professor at Yale University. I'm also the director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And I've written a book called Permission to Feel, and I'm a proud board member of CASEL. I spent the last 25 years of my life running around the world, trying to get people to talk about their feelings. And I just want to start off today with a little bit of my history related to SEL. So I was blessed, as I shared last week, that I had an uncle who was my hero. He was a pioneer in social and emotional learning before it was even a term. Back in the 1960s and 70s, he was writing a curriculum called Little People's Feelings. And this is in a little schoolhouse in the Catskill Mountains of New York State. And what happened with Uncle Marvin is that he was an interesting character. He was a band leader by night and a teacher by day. And interestingly, we would talk when I was younger, and he'd say things like, I don't really understand they're feeling it in the club at night, but they're not feeling it in my classroom. And then he said, well, what's the missing piece or the missing link? And he said, it's got to be feelings, that there's no feeling in the classroom, and that we're trying to be too cognitive in the way we're approaching education. So what he did very cleverly was he wrote a curriculum, and he took the social studies curriculum that existed, and he literally created an emotional theme for every single chapter. And what he would do was introduce different lessons and different historical figures, whether it be talking about Julius Caesar or whether he was talking about the Boston Tea Party or whatever it was. And he would introduce it through the lens of feelings. And so that was the beginning of my career when I was younger, and he practiced this with me. And I bring this up only because when Uncle Marvin and I started going on our journey to convince people to take the work that he had really done first seriously, we failed. And we failed because what we realized was that many of us didn't have the emotion education that we needed to do the work well in our classrooms. I don't know if you can relate to that, but people would say things like, I'm not comfortable talking about anxiety, or, my job is not necessarily to talk about feelings, or I'm going to talk about joy and jolly and cheerful, but not, frustrated, overwhelmed, and despair. And that's why last week's webinar really focused on why we, as the adults who are raising and teaching kids, need to have these skills first. What I want to do today is continue with that, but now focus on how do we as the adults help kids to develop those skills. And as I said before, if you'd like to share anything, you can use social media or contact me through the website. Maybe this quote will resonate with you. As you grow older, you will discover that you have two hands, one for helping yourself, the other for helping others. Let's just take a moment and reflect on that quote, please. What comes to mind for you? What does it make you think about? For me, The first thing that comes to mind is that it's all about the we. In the beginning, right, it's all about the me, and then later on in life, it all becomes about the we. How about for you? As you all know, I can't really do a presentation without asking people to check in with how they're feeling. So we're in week 2. Maybe it's the first time you're seeing the mood meter. Maybe it's the second or 300th. How are you feeling today? Remember, the x-axis is about your level of pleasantness. So you woke up this morning and you're thinking to yourself, I want to approach today, I want to avoid today. I predict things are going to go well. I predict things are not going to go so well. You check in with your body and your brain, and you feel energized, or you feel constricted or tight or depleted. And then we cross our axes to create our 4 quadrants: the yellow, the red, the blue, and the green. How are you feeling? What color are you in today? If you live with children or you teach children, what color are your children in, or are your students in today? Is there congruence between how you're feeling and how your kids are feeling? What are the words? And as you know, the mood meter is our tool to really flesh out our emotion vocabulary. There are about 2,000 words in the English language dictionary. Most of us use 2. How are you feeling? Fine. What's new? Nothing. How are you feeling? Busy. We don't really get granular. And I'm going to say up front that a big piece of the work that I'm going to share with you today is about we as the adults being granular and supporting our kids being granular in their feeling states. We know from research that right now, a lot of us are experiencing tremendous anxiety. It's understandable. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world. We know that our children are feeling frustrated and they're bored and anxious, and they're experiencing a lot of different emotions. And the question again is, how are we regulating those feelings? So for those of you who know my work, it focuses on a theory called emotional intelligence, which says that we can break apart our emotional life into 5 discrete skills that all map onto the CASEL competencies in the SEO work. Recognizing emotions in self and other, understanding the causes and consequences of emotion, labeling emotions with the precise words, knowing how and when to express emotions, and regulating emotions effectively. So we're going to break those skills down today. Today we're going to get granular. Identifying emotion, or perceiving or recognizing emotion. What is that? It's identifying emotion by interpreting our own thoughts and physiology, as well as others, facial expressions, vocal tones, body language, and behavior. So we're going to do a little exercise today. I'm going to display a facial expression, and you're all going to have to guess what it is. All right, here we go. Okay, so what do you think I was feeling? My hunch is that some of you wrote things like bored, calm, disappointed, a little worried, frustrated. Am I right? When I do this exercise with my own students, I find that there's like 15 different feelings that show up just from one facial expression. Think about that. It's only me, one face. And I get from calm to bored to like smug to content. And it makes me wonder. Well, firstly, most people see my natural state. I was, by the way, trying to show calm or content. But yet some people see smug or irritated or disappointed. And I think to myself, maybe that's the reason why I don't have that many friends. Just kidding. But truthfully, it makes you wonder. People see different things in the same facial expression. Who's right? Are we reading others' emotions, or are we attributing emotion to them? Think about how this exercise applies to parenting or to our classroom settings. I mean, really think about it. Kids are expressing their feelings all day long, and you're making attributions, or do you know how they really feel? We know that we have our own race and in-group biases when it comes to reading facial expressions. What that means specifically is that white people are better at reading white people, African American, Black people are better at reading Black people, but we also know that we have a majority bias, which means that our white friends are going to more likely misread our Black friends or Asian friends. And so we have to be super mindful when we're engaging in this process of perceiving emotion that we might be activating stereotypic information, whether it be about race or ethnicity or gender identity or sexual orientation, whatever it is. Importantly, familiarity matters. The more instances you have, like Melissa and Pamela, who are my CASEL friends here, I got to know them. I know them for 10 years or so. So I get to see them frequently. I kind of know how they respond to things. I'm going to be more accurate at reading them because I really know them well. So as we work with new students, we really have to get to know their stories if we want to be able to read their emotions well, which means that the only way to really know how someone is feeling is not to judge their expression, but to ask them that simple question: how are you feeling? And do something that many people don't necessarily do: really listen. Understanding emotion, knowing the causes and the contextual influences of emotions, as well as their consequences on our thinking, our decision making, and our behavior. Some things to remember about this: our emotions are constructed based on our life experiences. They are embedded in our culture. They are embedded in our development. We know there are global themes, like anger is about injustice and disappointment about unmet expectations, and anxiety around uncertainty. But I can tell you right now, the things that make me anxious are probably not going to be the things that make you anxious. And the things that might make the children in your classroom feel anxious are likely vastly different from the things that make you feel anxious. Think about this. Emotions are based on our appraisals of the environment. Let me give you an example. 3 of us are on a roller coaster ride. We're just sitting together in a seat. We're up high. And one of us is like, oh, it's so boring. The second one of us is like, come on, faster, 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 faster. The other one is saying, come on, you got to give me better than this. So it's the same roller coaster, but yet 3 people have completely different perceptions around the experience. Our understanding of emotion is based on our appraisals of our situations. It's important to understand that. And without understanding what's causing our kids to feel the way they do, we're not going to be able to help them. Think about that. Labeling emotions, having and using a nuanced vocabulary to describe the full range of emotions. Think about this. Certain languages have words we don't even have. We can enhance our understanding of other people's emotions and experiences by learning feeling words in other cultures. One of my favorite ones during this pandemic, I learned this word that I love. It's called mudita. It's a Sanskrit word for experiencing joy by observing other people experience joy. Think about that for a minute, because I'll be honest with you, my own experience of joy has been limited during these times, but I have gone out for walks or I've seen people in the park and they're like, see these kids playing, they're laughing and they're having fun. And I just kind of have that vicarious joy for them. That's mudita. It's an interesting experience. So one of the things now that I know that word is I kind of look for it more, because I could use some mudita today. I'm going to argue today that teaching our children the language to unpack their inner lives is our moral obligation. We deserve language to unpack our inner experiences, because without the language, It's very hard to get our needs met. It's very hard to communicate. And let's be real, to know someone well, we need to know, right, what makes them feel the way they do. Expressing emotion. Think about this. Knowing how and when to express emotion with different people and across contexts, including the influences of personality and gender and lots of other things, whether it be power or social norms or race, ethnicity, and culture. It's a complex skill here, this expressing emotion. And there's a lot of things we need to be mindful of. There are rules in our society about who gets the privilege to express certain emotions. Think about it. I'm a white guy presenting to you right now. I have a black colleague, professor here at Yale. The two of us are walking down the streets expressing anger. Will we be perceived differently? Absolutely. And so what this brings up for us is equity. It brings up bias. It brings up the structural things that need to change, that these skills are not just developed individually, but the contexts that we live in determine our ability to use these skills in the ways that help us promote our health and our wellness. We know from research that minority groups often have to engage in greater emotional labor or suppression of their true feelings compared to their white counterparts. And we know this impacts a lot, from identity development to health and wellness. At a broader scale, we have to be mindful of ethnocentrism, that our way is the right way, the Americana way, like eye contact, right? Like, look at me when I speak to you. I gave a talk on Wall Street about a year ago, and I remember I walked in and these guys were in their fancy suits and, hello, Dr. Brackett. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, I better get my testosterone shot. I'm not sure it's going to work for me here. And then I go to Korea, where I teach martial arts. It's a martial art called Hapkido. And I go to my little dojang in a little village in South Korea. Mark-san, who's right? Bad question. There is no right. There is no wrong. Be the curious emotion scientist, as I said last week, as opposed to the critical judge. This is so important for our work, because if we only approach the world through our selfish bias lens, we're missing a tremendous amount of information, especially when we're working with kids. Regulating emotion, the thoughts and actions that we use to prevent unwanted emotions, to reduce the difficult ones, to create the ones that we want to create, to maintain the ones that are unhelpful. And importantly, what we're going to focus on today is emotion co-regulation. What does that mean? It's that back and forth between teacher and student, between parent and child, between couples, that helps us to deactivate stress, that helps us to bond, that helps us to support others in learning the skills they need to manage their feelings. Few things about emotion regulation. One, as expression is, our strategies are completely linked to personality, family background, and culture. We know that context matters. It's amazing. Some parents say things like, why is my kid, in my martial arts classes, parents say, well, why is my kid so disciplined in your class, but they're a mess at home? I'm like, well, that's for you to figure out. But the truth is, we know that children, right, their behavior varies as a function of their environment. Remember, the goal of emotion regulation in this context is to support children in finding what works best for them, not what works best for you. Just like the other skills, we often have a bias. Like, I like hot yoga. So that means you need to use hot yoga. Right? But why don't you like it? What do you mean you don't like it? Or I like to run, which I don't like to do, by the way. But runners always like, how could you not want to run? It's like the most freeing, amazing thing. I'm like, I hate running. I can't get into it. It doesn't make me a bad person. It just, everyone's going to find the strategies that work best for them. And one thing that I think is so critically important is that, and I don't even know where this comes from, because none of us have ever written it, but somehow or another, some people think emotion regulation is about controlling. No, it's about using emotions wisely. Very different framing. So my job as a teacher, as a parent, is to co-regulate, to support you, the child, and find the strategies that work best for you to achieve your well-being, your relationship status, your goals, your dreams. And again, there's no criterion of correctness. And I say this because I think as educators, we're so used to like, this is the right answer, like 5 + 5 = 10. It doesn't work that way for emotions. There's no criterion of correctness. As long as you don't hurt yourself or hurt others, it's about a journey that we go on for ourselves and that we support our kids to go through, to navigate their feelings, to help them find the strategies that work best for them for different feelings. Because the strategies that work best for me when I'm overwhelmed, like taking things off my plate, don't really work for when I'm disappointed, which is when I want to call someone and talk through the problem, or when I'm angry, when I need to really reflect a little bit. Hope this makes sense to you. I'm going to share one of my favorite tools. This is in our approach to SEL called Ruler. It's called the meta moment. And it's a 4-step process that I think we've gone through a little bit already. Let's think about that. The mood meter, we sense our feelings. We're activated. My hunch is that many of you as educators get activated by kids. I'm activated in my role as a professor at a place like Yale. One of my largest triggers or activations is entitlement. Right, Professor Brackett, I've got a question, but I don't think you'll know the answer. Okay, thank you very much. Just thinking about that makes me nuts. A lot of parents, what are your triggers, right? Limit setting, bedtime, coming down for meals, getting the backpack ready when we used to go, if you go to in-person school. I mean, the list goes on, right? Not respecting you when you ask them to come down for a meal. Endless. Same thing applies in the classroom. Disrespect is a big one I hear from teachers. It just brings up the worst. And so when we are activated as the adults who are raising and teaching kids, we have to be the role models to take that breath, to pause. And then we have to see what we call our best selves. And today we're going to go deeper into that process of being our best selves in just a minute. Let's think about it. Step 1, sense. You're driving me out of my mind. I don't think I can handle this anymore. Your body starts getting tense and racing. Your face gets a little weird, right? That's noticing the shift. Step 2, you pause. You don't say it. You want to say it, but you don't. Because you have knowledge that when you've said it in the past, it escalates or it causes relationship challenges or suppression on their part. So you take a few breaths, you take a step back, you pinch yourself, Mark, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. Maybe even leave the room for a second. And in that space between that trigger and that automatic habitual reaction, you rewind and you see your best self. What does that mean exactly? Well, we're going to do a little exercise right now on this. The way we see this is that our best selves are a combination of our personal best, the parent, the teacher, you want to be deep inside. And it's also related to how you want to be seen and talked about and experienced in the world by your kids as a teacher. If your students were writing a letter of recommendation for you, how would they describe you? So I'd like you to take a moment right here, right now, and just go quickly. List 3 adjectives that you would use to describe your personal best. the teacher, the parent you want to be. The characteristics that have deep meaning to you. Next, and they might be related, but they might be somewhat different. Reputational self. How you want to be seen. How you want to be talked about. How you want to be experienced. Think about it for a minute. We all have a reputation, every one of us. We may not want to know what it is, but we got it. What would you like your reputation to be as a parent, as an educator? And of all the adjectives you just listed, which three stand out to you as the most important? And I'm going to ask you for your homework to really think about how will these show up for you? What can you do differently? Right after this webinar, tonight, tomorrow, that will demonstrate these adjectives. When we've asked people in the past, the number one word was compassionate. Interestingly enough, when we asked people over the last couple of months, patient showed up as being one of the most important characteristics. I think because of the circumstances that we're under right now, people's fuses are just really just a lot shorter than usual. Maybe these show up for you. And here's what we know, that when you take this step process seriously, you will choose and use better strategies for yourself and for supporting your children. Why is that? Well, when we get activated and triggered, we tend to focus on the trigger. Right? I dare you to talk to me that way. Who do you think you are? We've all felt it and have not said it. That's because we're in survival mode. Well, what the meta moment does is it helps us to deactivate, and it reminds us of the self that we ideally want to be. And in turn, we can respond through that lens. So we're going to try this right now. I want everyone to take a moment and think about a time that you were activated by a student or even a colleague or your own child, doesn't matter who. Maybe this has been a continuous challenge for you. How are you feeling? And you don't have to share this publicly, but be honest with yourself. What was your automatic unhelpful response? Really, think about it. Here's the beauty of this webinar, that we get to make a new movie. Isn't that fun? You all get to become directors and cinematographers and editors. I'm going to ask you to go back to the same situation. Imagine yourself in the scenario. You were activated, but now you pause and you take that breath and you activate your best self. And you use a helpful strategy, a more pro-social, proactive way of responding to the trigger. And now in your movie, you can visualize a very different end to your movie. So I ask all of you, what's different by applying this process to dealing with your feelings in relation to children? Imagine teaching this to children. So I've had the privilege of seeing this over the course of my career. It's unbelievable just to see how children can, like, you can watch when they're taking these meta moments, and they just respond to very difficult situations with greater compassion or with greater assertiveness. Why assertiveness? Our best selves are contextual, they're role specific. I'll give you an example from my own self. I was bullied about 2 years ago. I'm 49. I was bullied by another professor at my university who's just a real, and I was doing a presentation, and what he did, which was completely inappropriate, he showed a video of this kid being bullied by a coach, and he knew that I had terrible bullying as a kid. And he basically said to the audience after I had presented, "Oh, that was Mark before he got his black belt." What was fascinating to me in that moment is that, well, firstly, I have a 5th degree black belt. My instinct was to run the stage and do a flying drop kick and just knock him out. No, just kidding, not really. Well, I'd be lying if I didn't say it was true. I was pissed. But I also found myself regressing. Can you relate to that? Like, boom, I regressed to being that 12-year-old kid who was being picked on and bullied. And it took me so much courage, even as a 5th degree black belt, full professor guy, expert in emotional intelligence, to just take that breath and to think about how was I going to respond to this. And in that moment, it was with courage. And essentially, after he was done speaking, I had the courage to say something like, I have no clue what got into you, but like, can't do it again. Like, that was not cool. And if it was hard for me, who spends his life doing this work, imagine what it's like to be a kid who doesn't have these skills. So I'm going to tell you right now, and I'll repeat myself a million times, it is our moral obligation to teach these skills to kids. We can be proactive as parents, as teachers, and walk into our situations through the lens of our best self, because then we can get better at dealing with those triggers or those things in the moment. So let's take a moment and let's just set a goal and make a commitment. Think about these 4 steps. Just think about it. Being more self-aware, taking that breath, activating your best self, responding and strategizing through the lens of your best self. Come on, set the intention. You can do this. I'd like you to think about what will be different for you as an educator, as a parent, as a result of using this tool. Really, what do you feel? What do you notice different about your life? And it's also important to think about what might get in the way. Like one mom, she said, "Oh, Mark, I'm trying to be my best self. I'm trying, but I'm just so tired." Okay, so you need to get more rest. Think about it. What are the barriers that might prevent you from being your best self? And what can you do to work on those too? All right, in my last little bit with all of you, we're going to try to put this together into a little package to apply everything we just talked about to supporting kids. Step 1, you're working with kids. Maybe the kid is activating you. Maybe it's not a good situation, right? You got to be aware what you bring to the situation, right? Your privilege, your power, your bias, whatever it might be. How are you feeling? What are your nonverbals communicating? Are you able to not be activated? So here's an example. My mom was not very good. I came home from school. "I hate you. I'm never going to school again." "Who do you think you are talking to the way? Go to your room. Wait till your father gets home." Can't wait for dad to get home. Of course, then my parents would get into a fight. And my father would come upstairs. "Son, if I have to tell you one more time." And then my parents would get into a fight. And then my mother would sometimes come back into my bedroom and say something like this, you know something, Mark, I saved you this time. I don't know, saved me from what, 10 years of therapy? From becoming an emotion scientist? So we have to be the adult role models. The situation I just shared with you, what happened? I never got the help I needed because my parents never knew how I was feeling. In school, horribly bullied as a kid to the point where I had school refusal, to the point where I would just walk around with such low self-esteem from people literally taking pens and markers and writing on my jackets because I was wearing that as a form of protection. And I, to this day, remember some of my teachers witnessing that behavior and looking the other way. So this first step is really, really important. You've got to be the role model. You've got to set up for success. You've got to be your best self. Once you've become your best self and you're deactivated, you can be more present. You can lead with compassion and empathy. You can approach with a welcoming facial expression and a warm voice. You can use those skills of the emotion scientist that I talked about last week. Open and curious versus closed and critical, using gentle exploration, undivided attention, listening for the theme and the story behind what's happening, validating all emotions. Remember, there's no such thing as a bad experience or feeling. Avoid telling the child what they're feeling. Find out what they're actually feeling. So in my story, one of my examples that I wrote about is my father wanted me to become an expert in karate, which I ended up becoming, by the way, which is a whole nother story. But when I first got into the martial arts, I failed my yellow belt test. So demoralized. I can't even get a yellow belt. And I went home and I hate karate. I'm never going back to karate. And of course, it was that same scene. Who do you think you are? You can't talk to me that way. You got to calm down. And essentially what happened in that scenario was that I was threatened when I failed my yellow belt that I was going to be beaten up the next day on the way to school. But because my parent was so activated by my behavior, which does not equal emotion, say that again, everyone together, behavior does not equal emotion, they never found out how I felt because it became about them being triggered, not about me as the kid. Remember, all emotions for children are approach. You always approach. We're not going to tell kids how they're feeling. We're going to explore how they're actually feeling. That's why we, as the adults who are raising and teaching kids, have to become those scientists who are explorers, listening. Is it a disappointment theme? Is it a danger theme? Is it an uncertainty theme? So that we can label those feelings with our child, not for them. The third step is strategizing. Are we helping that child find the strategies that work best for them? Whether it be a mindful breathing exercise, whether it be helping them with their self-talk or reappraisal, whether it be taking a walk, creative problem solving. Be the learner, not the knower. Remember, as I said, the strategy that might work best for you may not work best for them. And you have to ask yourself, does my child have the permission to use the strategy that works best for them? Does my kid in my classroom, do I allow them the movement they might need, or the time to reflect or journal, or to take a little walk, or whatever it might be? It's a lot of work. And then we got to follow up. This is a journey. How many times have you failed at regulating your feelings? You can't just give up. Think about the fear that I had as a kid in school around being bullied and my academic performance. How much follow-up was there? Were you checking in on a weekly, daily basis? How are you feeling? What strategies are you using? Are you ensuring that your child is developing healthy strategies? Are you ensuring that your kids in your classroom are developing healthy strategies? Does everyone in your classroom have a go-to strategy when they're feeling stressed or worried, or do they not? When I go around to schools to see if SEL is really implemented, those are the kinds of questions I ask. I go in the hallway and I say, hey, you, when you're really upset about something, what's your go-to strategy? Every child should have that. Whew. Got a lot of work to do, but we're going to get there, I promise. So we also have to notice the successes, right? That positive empathy, and reinforce those successes. And obviously the goal here is to build better habits. So let's put it all together. We're going to give our kids and we're going to give ourselves, again, the permission to have all our feelings and to fail. Remember, taking a meta moment doesn't mean you're a pushover. It doesn't mean you're always being nice. Sometimes it means setting limits and being assertive. We're going to strive to be those compassionate, culturally responsive emotion scientists and not the critical closed emotion judges. Try to set daily intentions. Appreciate that we have to be our best selves and it takes considerable effort. We're going to be those role models for our kids as much as possible. One thing I always tell people, don't wait for other people to do the work for you, or don't wait for other people to do the work, right? Have the courage to be the first to do this work. Some schools are like, oh, this best self stuff. I'm like, don't listen to those people. You have yourself to contend with. And if you fail, maybe, just maybe, be open to apologizing and forgiving. Lastly, what I want to say is, I feel extraordinarily fortunate to be in the position I'm in. With my childhood trauma, I've through a million resources, whether it be therapy, whether it be martial arts, whether it be college, whether it be Uncle Marvin, my hero in life, whether it be the years that I've spent understanding emotional intelligence and social emotional and writing curriculum and practicing it, that I feel I have good health and wellness. And I worry these days with the amount of anxiety and fear that our children are experiencing, especially our children in our most underserved communities. And I go to these school systems and I think about, like, for example, in New York City, 1.1 million children, 90% living in poverty. Are all 1.1 million of these children going to develop the skills and to grow up in environments so their dreams can come true? And I'm not 100% there yet in terms of my optimism. So I want to end by saying, firstly, thank you for joining CASEL CARES. And second, by saying, I need you to get on this bus. And I need you to make sure that your school takes this work in the most systemic way possible so that every child can achieve their dreams. And on that note, I just want to say thank you again for attending. There's more information on my website. You can learn more about the Center for Emotional Intelligence, my own research, and there are free articles and blogs and even my book club that I'm starting in a couple of weeks. And on that note, thank you. And I'm excited to now take some questions from my friend and colleague, Dr. Pamela Randall Gardner, who is one of the key people at CASEL who works in the Collaborative District Initiative. So, Pamela.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am feeling so full of mudita. Is that how you say it?
It is. Good.
Full of joy. I am going to do my own little personal experiment. Whenever I start a session with you, Mark, I'm going to take my blood pressure and then I'm going to check my blood pressure on the back end because I always feel like, oh, thank you, Mark. Thank you so much for those helpful strategies. I also especially appreciate you bringing in the equity implications around emotions and emotion regulation. I'm thinking of a particular district that we work with, and a lot of those Black boys are sent out of classrooms out of defiance because the teacher read a facial expression or some type of action as defiant. And I think it was just a particularly helpful reminder that it's our moral obligation as adults to model for our students and to not jump to those stereotypical, I'm trying to think what you said, stereotypical information or ethnocentric, the ethnocentric implications around this. So thank you for that reminder. I'm going to jump into some questions now.
Okay.
Okay, the first one has to do with, could you please give some insights or ideas specific to our younger children of helping them when we think about developmental stages? What insights or ideas can you provide us in terms of helping them with their emotions?
I always go back to, I'll say this, that, from as early as the child being in the womb, we can be role models. That, right, a stressed out mom during pregnancy or a stressed out dad during pregnancy can impact, right, the developing fetus. So we as the adults who are bringing children into this world or teaching kids or raising kids, we have to really work, on modulating our stress levels to be more deactivated and more present. It's just so important. Once this beautiful thing is in the world, again, be the role model. The healthy co-regulator of an infant, right, is really monitoring their vocal tone, their warm facial expressions, their body language, the way they touch. So from that early on, that child is getting a feeling from the adult who is, raising them. And then we have to be role models for using good language. You can't just say, fine, busy, leave me alone, right? That's not helpful, right? So we're coaching our kids by first being the role model. And then, with the mood meter, for example, we know that we can teach 3-year-olds how to use the mood meter. And a lot of my psychology friends are like, I can't believe that. I'm like, come look. They can do it. I've had kids who are like 3-year-olds like saying, I think my sister's in the red right now. And they can even identify other people's emotions in the quadrants. So you start big, like you're not going to teach 2-year-olds like the words like alienation and despair and elation, right? You start with happy, calm, sad, mad, and then organically you start building out, right, that granularity.
Great. I have several nieces and nephews that I'm going to take your good advice. Start working with those 2 and 3-year-old nieces and nephews. All right, the next question is, how do adults, parents, and teachers work together to support children during these trying times? How can we be a team together?
Yeah, it's funny because we always should have been a team, right?
Yeah.
But I think, when chaos hits, it's obviously much more important. One of the things that we do in Ruler, which I think all SEL approaches should do, is make sure that the same things that children are learning, parents are learning. And so, for example, the mood meter, just using that because it's one of our signature tools, like everybody knows everybody. So I'll give you one example is that on this district on Long Island, they have mood meter day. And it's like back to school. And so every parent, instead of going to the classroom, reports to the auditorium. The principal of the school teaches all 3,000 families the tool. And then the kids make one as a gift to their parents. And then the kids go home and teach their parents how to use it. And I think that those kinds of activities in the field of SEL are so critical that we build a common language. So the superintendent, the school board member, the high school teacher, the preschool teacher, the parent, everyone has the common language.
Including the cafeteria worker, the bus driver, everybody.
Actually, one of my favorite experiences was I was visiting a school in Seattle, and all the Seattle schools use our approach. And I walked into the school and there was a woman who was like taking attendance. And she didn't know who I was. And I walked in, I'm like, oh, I'm here to see your principal. And she goes, oh, but everybody who comes into our school has to plot themselves on the mood meter. I'm like, that's cool. Tell me more about it. And she's like, well, here it is. And she shows me this. And then she's like, where are you today? I tell you this because what I love about it is the following. I said, well, tell me how do you, like, I'm really curious as the woman who takes attendance, like, why are you doing this? Oh, it's just because a lot of times when the kids get dropped off late, they're all flustered. And so I'm the person that can check in with them. I have a little mood meter card. I check the box that they're in. And if they're not in the best place for learning, I walk them over to the strategy wall. And then we talk about the strategy so they can practice the strategy before they get into the classroom. She's like, what do you think? I'm like, I think I love you. You know, I'm like, this is not part of our training, but when SEL is done well,
Right.
it has all these creative adaptations for families, for people who take attendance, for transportation department staff, for everybody.
It's a perfect example of what you're talking about in terms of modeling it. Did you ever tell her who you were?
I did. And she was like, oh my God, the Moon Meter Man.
Right. All right, we have time for a few more questions. So the next one, love this. Are there specific strategies that can best support students with disabilities, especially our kiddos with autism or other disabilities?
Again, this is why it's like, an IEP would be for learning. The same thing applies to social and emotional development. You got to know the child, and we've got to find ways to understand what their needs are. Some kids need motor, activity in order to help them regulate. Some kids need more quietness. Some people need social support. Some people just need a drink of water. And so I think what's most important is to find ways to find out what the child believes they need and go through that lens. What can I help you? If you were the child, Pamela, it's, I would say things like, what are you thinking about right now? What would you like? And try to support the child in discovering what might work best for them. We know as the experts that there are these categories of strategies, right? There's like the cognitive strategies, like we can shift the way we think. We can say more positive things to ourselves. We know that there are these movement strategies, whether it be going for a walk or, just taking a pause or, doing a little stretching or something like that. And then we know there's like relationship strategies where I can engage with people to talk through things or just be in the presence of someone who really shows their compassion for me. And I think we have to discover with our kids, which of these buckets work best for them for which emotions.
Thank you. Here's another. What considerations are important when supporting children who may have experienced trauma? So much trauma that we're experiencing right now. So what can we think about or suggest in terms of specific supports for those kiddos?
I think, with trauma, what we know is that we want to be mindful that we don't want to be the trauma reminder. Mm-hmm. Meaning we don't want to be the person that reactivates that child's experience, right? So if that child is coming from a family where they might be, sadly abused or there's a lot of violence, we really have to be mindful of our facial expressions and our body language and our vocal tone around these children. I think that the largest challenge, with children who are experiencing trauma is that their nervous systems are so taxed because they're in constant fight, flight, freeze mode. So I would argue that it is our job as educators and as parents to do everything we can to help that child's nervous system to be less activated. Because when you're always in like, am I going to be hurt? Am I going to be safe? Am I going to be hurt? Am I going to be safe? It literally breaks apart your entire system. And so to me, the first is A, safe, supportive, caring, loving environment, facial expressions, all that piece around the things that are surrounding that child, which may just be you as the teacher, if that's all the kids got. And then the second is to do everything we can to help them not be so vigilant and so hyper in terms of their nervous system.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more. How might we build these strategies into the regular school day? How can we make time for this, for it to be prioritized, that this is what we do on a daily basis?
Yeah, well, you're talking this is like, that's my Bible, because I don't see how we don't do it.
Right.
You know, emotions are at the core of attention and memory and learning. We learn what we care about. And then importantly, you know, the roller coaster ride of emotions. Think about, I mean, I do this reflection with teachers a lot, and I say, just take a moment and just vicariously live through the life of one of your children. We can maybe end with this little reflection. And just take a moment, whoever's on this webinar, and pick a student and become that student for the next 30 seconds. You wake up in that student's home. How are you feeling? You're commuting to school. How are you feeling? You walk into the school and you look around. How are you feeling? Class 1, class 2, class 3. Who are you with? How are you feeling? Lunchtime, phys ed. Who are you with? How are you feeling? Class 4, class 5. It's the end of the school day. You're walking out. How do you feel? Where are you going? Your outside of school time provider, your home, your commute. You get home. How are you feeling? I have parents break down in tears when they do this exercise. I have teachers have epiphanies like, I'm the cause of my kids' unpleasant feelings. And so when we understand that emotions are always at the core of learning, of teaching, then it becomes, again, our moral obligation to make sure that we're checking in with students throughout the day and ensuring that they're using strategies that best serve them.
Thank you, Mark. Again, great reflection, great reminder. We are just so appreciative of you spending this quality time around the CASEL CARES webinars. We thank you so much. I've learned so much. I have so many notes right here. And like I said, this is going to be my standing experiment. Like, how am I before I start with Marc Brackett?
Oh, there you go.
So thank you so much.